All right, guys, here we are on day 28 of the government shutdown. But what is really bothering me is the fact that the Republicans just keep flat out lying about why the government is shut down. And that's easy to do because it is complicated what's happening behind the scenes. I do have an undergraduate degree in government politics, so I thought, hey, might as well put it to good use. I want to explain realistically what's happening behind the scenes so that everybody can understand why the Democrats are trying to hold the line. Okay, super simple version, right? There's one pot of money, and the Republicans and the Democrats are arguing over how to spend that money. You have to look back at the One Big Beautiful Bill. And that was basically just like a multi-trillion-dollar spending plan, all right? But it doesn't allocate the money to anything. So it basically says, here's where I want all the American taxpayer money spent for the next 10 years. What happened is it's reshuffling, basically. So instead of that money being spent on what it's currently being spent on, a lot of social safety programs, green energy, DEI initiatives, things like that, the Trump administration, because they're working from the Project 2025 playbook, they're saying, oh, no, we want that spent on border security, oil subsidies, we want to gut green energy, and we basically want to try to get rid of social welfare programs. So that's the base of the argument. Now you have to remember that when the One Big Beautiful Bill went through Congress, right, it sailed through the House and the Senate because the Republicans are in charge. The Democrats couldn't fight back then. So the only leverage that they have is when it came to the budget, which is what you see them doing now. Because, okay, so it already cruised through the House, but the budget is held up in Senate because it requires 60 votes, right? And the Republicans only have, I think, 52 votes in the Senate. So they need the help of 8 Democrats, which is why the government is shut down. Because the Democrats are saying, no, we're not going to give you help. We're not playing ball until you work with us about how this money gets allocated. So yeah, maybe some of it can go to your priorities, but a lot of it still needs to take care of these social safety programs, etc. For example, when the One Big Beautiful Bill passed, which I'll just call BBB from now on, it basically said, we're going to build a ton of new border facilities, but it didn't write any checks specifically. And that brings us to the next step, which is the appropriation bills, of which there are 12. Those are the detailed spending laws that basically say, okay, here's how much ICE actually gets this year, here's how much SNAP gets, etc. And without those appropriations bills being passed, the agencies, they cannot legally spend money, which is why we're shut down. You may have heard the term continuing resolution floated. And what that basically means is, hey, we're just going to keep the government open and we're going to keep spending at the levels that we were spending this past year. But basically, that's just like them hitting pause until we get past the midterms. Because they know full well that the things that were voted into law when the BBB passed are not popular with the American public, all right? It's getting rid of things like the ACA subsidies, SNAP benefits, etc. So the Republicans want to pass a continuing resolution, right? To just keep it spending at the same level. It's not because they're conceding anything to the Democrats. It's because they want it to just sail through the midterms so that people aren't pissed off because they don't realize what's happened. It would be basically like them saying, yeah, okay, we'll basically pass the same budget from last year for next year. Then they'll go through the midterms. And then when the budget comes back up, what they'll do is they say, now we're going to gut it because we're not in front of the American people anymore. We're not staring down a midterm election. So in other words, the Republicans are not trying to use the continuing resolution to keep the budget the same forever. They're trying to use it as a temporary truce so that they can keep the pressure on the Democrats so that they can make them fold after the midterms. Okay. Now again, remember that when the BBB passed, the Democrats are in the minority. So the only power that the Democrats have left is to control how much of the bill actually gets funded this year and how that money is divided. But while the Democrats are holding out, what they're saying is like, yeah, okay, you passed your BBB, but we're not going to rubber stamp funding that starves American citizens to feed corporations, because that is what's going on in the background. It's literally the Democrats' last line of defense to protect SNAP, Medicaid, disaster relief, and ACA subsidies, not just for this year, but for a decade. Because you have to remember that every year's budget fits into something that's called a 10-year baseline. And the BBB already rewrote that baseline to favor corporations and defense. So if the Democrats fold and lose this shutdown fight, the actual appropriations will lock in at that new baseline. Meaning, even when new Congress comes in, they'll have to start from those lower funding levels for all social programs. And that is why this shutdown isn't about reopening the government. It's about which version of America gets funded for the next 10 years. If you've made it this far in the video, don't forget to like, repost, and follow for updates, and put the secret words, "Our money belongs to us," in the comment section. And guys, if you enjoy my videos, go follow me here because, TikTok keeps getting rid of left-leaning content creators. Okay, now on to what each party actually wants. Republican demands. They want to pour tens of billions into mass deportations, detention centers, and border enforcement contracts. Translation: more jails, more buses, more private prison contracts. Who cashes in, you might ask? Companies like CoreCivic and GEO Group, yes, huge donors to Donald Trump's campaign. And even though the border crossings are down by 93%, they still want a huge chunk of money for building that wall. And who benefits from that? Fisher Sand and Gravel, yes, another Trump donor. And why do they care about building the wall if border crossings are already down? Symbolism, because it sells, it gets people to the polls. And of course, spending cuts. They want to slash $2 trillion. That includes cutting funding for green energy, foreign aid, DEI programs, for their corporate donors. Because of course, corporate donors love deregulation because they can make more money. All billionaire funders who paid money into Trump's PAC. And then last but not least, to end the Affordable Care Act subsidies. Period. That's the health insurance that makes it affordable for roughly 24 million Americans to have health insurance in this country. If those subsidies expire, they're going to jump by like 20 to 50%, but Republicans are like, hey, we're going to save $400 billion. They're freeing that money up because they want to give tax breaks to billionaires. Translation: you pay more so that Exxon and Pfizer pay less. All Trump donors. The Democrats want to keep the ACA subsidies in place through 2030. It's about $1.5 trillion spread across those years, but it's what's keeping all of those people insured. They're also pushing for $100 billion in disaster aid relief for things like rebuilding after hurricanes, crop insurance, etc. And they want to protect the social safety nets like SNAP, Medicaid, and the child tax credit. They want to keep them fully funded so kids don't go hungry and families don't lose health care mid-recession. So in other words, in case I was being unclear, Republicans are writing budgets that reward corporations. Democrats are fighting for the rights of states and citizens. So no, this shutdown isn't about fiscal responsibility. It's about using hunger and healthcare as bargaining chips to guarantee billion-dollar paydays for people who've never missed a meal. So now that you know all that and you understand what's actually on the line, do you guys think that the Democrats should hold the line or fold? Let me know. Let's start a conversation. But I wanted you to know the truth of why the government is shut down, not just the 30-second sound bites that are being fed to us by Mike Johnson. If you found this helpful, please share it with a friend because I think we all deserve to understand what is happening, and that is what is happening.